Good morning, and welcome to the Winchester Unitarian Society. I am the Reverend Heather Janulis. It is my great honor to serve as parish minister here. If you are logging on from Winchester or Watertown or New York City or Chicago or Iceland, wherever you are coming in from, we are so glad that you have joined us for worship. Your presence and your attention helps make this sacred time and sacred space. Here at the Winchester Unitarian Society, at the building, we're doing something a little bit different this morning. Our children are unable to enter the building these days, so we decided to begin our service with a little bit of outdoor intergenerational worship. We've created this video, which will run concurrent with our outdoor activities. Much of the content is the same. So by the time we enter the building and the video completes, we should all be in the same place. So we hope you enjoy this video, and I look forward to seeing you live on the live stream in a few minutes. Come, come, whoever you are. Do you hear that voice calling you, calling us? That voice which calls us together here today, made holy by our presence and by the sacred breath we share in our singing and speaking and silence. That voice which calls us to remember that we are not alone, and that we are inextricably linked to all other life, woven into a vast tapestry of existence, of which we are a powerful, integral, and holy part. And just as we have been called together here today, we act as the voice, the heart, the hands of another call. The call to companion the wanderers, sing and dance with the worshipers, proclaim the memory of those who have taken their leave, wrap the despairing and the broken in the arms of love and community, and hold the hands of all who have broken our vows and call us back again and again, the covenant and work of justice, humility, and steadfast faithfulness. For this, we are here together today. So, my friends, come yet again. Come, let us worship together. And let us begin by singing our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times,
come, come, whoever you are, wander, worship, mother of Eve, ours is no carol and all despair. Come, yet again, come, 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 whoever you are, wander, worship, mother of Eve, ours is no carol and all despair. Again, come.
Once upon a time, actually the time was 400 years ago, there was a place very far away. It was called England. It is still called England. England was ruled by a king. Actually, there was a long line of kings. The kings had control over everything, including religion. For many in England, there was little difference between the king and God. But there were some people who did not see the king this way. They wanted their religion to become more based in the Bible, more pure. They became known as Puritans. The king did not like the Puritans, as they challenged his power, and the Puritans did not like the king because he prevented them from freely worshiping as they believed. So the Puritans did a brave thing. They left England and traveled to a new world, to a place eventually called New England. Of course, New England is not very far away. New England is right here. Now we're talking about local history. The Puritans created a society where they could worship as they wanted, and where the society was run according to what they thought were the rules of God. They created churches where the church community was the ruler of itself, not the king. It was hard to become a member of the church. People had to prove that they truly believed in God. But those accepted into the church made a religious promise to the congregation. It was called a covenant. One of the first covenants was the Salem Covenant, written in 1629. You can tell it was written a long time ago because of the old-fashioned language. We covenant with the Lord and with one another, and do bind ourselves in the presence of God. To walk together in all his ways, according as he is pleased to reveal himself unto us in his blessed word of truth. A lot has changed since then. Now we welcome people into our spiritual community if they believe in God, or don't believe in God. Now we believe that what is most important is that we share the same values and that we believe in each other. The Winchester Unitarian Society is a direct but distant descendant from the Puritan believers who traveled here long ago. While we believe different things now, we still rely on spiritual promises, and we still believe in the importance of religious freedom and the ability to decide what is right for us as a community. Our chalice lighting words are a modern form of that first covenant written in 1629. Ourselves together in the presence of this religious community to express our deepest and most cherished convictions as they are born by each person, to find a common vision for a better world, to seek the life of the Spirit as it is known by each person, choosing with reverence its name, and to walk together in the way of truth and love as it is shown to us and to all people in word and in deed.
May the light within you shine before you every day. May the light within you shine before you, guide your way, guide your way. May the love we share surround you and chase your fears away. May the light within you shine before you. This we pray, this we pray.
Welcome, everyone, to the continuation of this morning's service in the sanctuary, the service of the Winchester Unitarian Society, a caring community devoted to spiritual growth, social transformation, and environmental responsibility. And as a welcoming congregation, we affirm the full inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Martin Newhouse, and I'm worship associate this morning. As Reverend Heather indicated in the presentation a moment ago, the first reflection, as Unitarian Universalists, our faith does not require us to believe in any particular tenet or creed, and among us we believe many different things. As the first minister of this society, Richard Metcalf, put it so many years ago, we do not regard even the best creed as final. We look for new truths and new statements of old ones. We maintain the unlimited right of free inquiry. But while our faith does not impose any particular theology or belief or system, we recognize joyfully that it does call upon us to do certain things. Among them, we recognize and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. In that spirit, we of course have already done so, but I'll just reiterate that we greet with joy and fellowship both those who are gathering with us this morning in person and those who are gathering with us through our live stream. And just as a reminder, and I'll be saying this again later, after the service, those here in the sanctuary are invited to enjoy coffee hour on the Bell Tower Terrace outdoors where we just were. Those online are invited to join our Zoom room for virtual social hour, and the link is in our order of service. Being out there on the terrace made me wish we could transport our church to a warm climate of liberal persuasion so we could be out on the terrace every Sunday. Anyway, this morning there's just one announcement to which I now invite you to pay attention. The church's annual community dance, sponsored by the Cherney Thomas's Fund, will take place today in our parking lot from 4 to 6 p.m. Come and dance to live music, led by caller Marcy Van Cleve, Masks are required even outside, but fun is guaranteed. Okay, let us now continue our service, opening our hearts and minds to a time of centering.
We center our hearts and minds together, first through words, and then through ritual, kindling of the light. A time to light a candle here in the sanctuary or at home to signify a joy or sorrow you carry within. For those who are gathered here in the sanctuary, please be sure to keep space between you as you line up at the table. At that time, if you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand, and Martin will bring that to your seat. After we kindle the light, we will be together in a time of shared silence. Let us begin. Spirit of life, God of promises known and unknown, we ask for your presence in this time when the night comes sooner and the days grow colder. We ask for your presence in this time, which is, like every time, a time of change. For our patience we didn't know is frayed until that one last thing happens. For the fear and sorrow that appears when we least expect it. For the uncertainty that gives the illusion that we are alone and incapable. For the things of which we are well aware that wake us early or rob us of sleep in the first place. Give us comfort, give us peace. Give us strength so we may move forward in this season with grace and with kindness. For all these things, and for the things known only to us that dwell silently within, let us now kindle the light.
Our reading this morning comes from Kintsugi and Covenant by Sana Saeed. It's abridged. So I will begin the reading. And these are the author's words. When I think about covenant making, I think of kintsugi. Kintsugi is a Japanese practice of repairing broken pottery in which cracks are filled with golden paint, highlighting the shapes of the cracks. The golden traced shape of the flaws adds to the beauty of the piece. And if I may have an aside, we have here an example of a bowl repaired that way. I think it's hard to see. It'll be on the table if you want to come inspect it, but I think you can all see how beautiful it is. How beautiful this bowl is, a broken bowl repaired in that method of kintsugi with the golden paint, which gives it something very special. To return to the reading. I learned kintsugi when I lived in Tokyo, and the process often made me think of the ways we deal with our own brokenness in life. I was recently able to practice kintsugi with a chalice that I ordered online. It arrived broken in several places. I decided to use kintsugi as a meditative practice. It allowed me to reflect on the ways brokenness and grief were part of my life this past year during the pandemic, but also on healing. Author Laura Casely writes, quote, "A much-used, well-worn object is considered beautiful for its history and for how useful it has been. The cracks signify an event in the life of this bowl, the way a scar or a laugh line might signify an event in a person's life. It reminds us that the things we think are flaws, like scars, blemishes, wrinkles, or other signs of our own wear and tear, are actually signs of our unique growth and stories. Kintsugi taught me to enter co-creating covenants humbly, knowing we will make mistakes. While we will aspire to stay in right relationship, there will be times when we will break the promise we make. After some time, when the glue dries and the pieces of the chalice are holding themselves up, we then trace the cracks of the once broken chalice in gold, symbolizing the ways we renewed our promise and deepened our relationship. Covenant-making work can be joyful work, but it is hard. It calls us to being accountable when we harm. Consider the words of Mia Mingus from her blog post, Dreaming Accountability. What if accountability wasn't scary? What if our own accountability wasn't something we ran from, but something we ran towards and desired, appreciated, held as sacred? What if we cherished opportunities to take accountability as precious opportunities to practice liberation, to practice love, to practice that which we can only practice in real time? We can only practice courage when we are afraid. We can only practice taking accountability when we have wronged or harmed or hurt. Practice yields the sharpest analysis. Think of what it would be like living and knowing that covenants you have committed to are like a cracked, illuminated, and healed dish, covered in gold cracks, highlighting the beauty of the ways we come back together into our beloved community. May that thought give us hope and ground us in resilience, knowing we can do the work of liberation rigorously if it means we all can be free. There ends the reading.
As usual, the anthem was worth the price of admission alone. Thank you, choir. This morning in our first reflection, I shared a story, and I want to share another story. In the first weeks of my first ministry, a woman came to see me. Nearly 90 years old, she was a lifelong member of that church. Her parents had joined in the late 19th century. She didn't like change, she said. She wasn't sure that she liked me or what she called my point of view. Just remember, she said, I have outlived all of your predecessors, and I will probably outlive you. This woman was a dedicated political conservative in what had become a progressive community. She was a liberal Christian in a congregation that noted gracious eras of theological diversity and some fits of intolerance. In this church of her childhood, which she had never left, most votes at the annual meeting had not gone her way for the past 40 years. In the end, she did outlive me there. She died shortly after I accepted a new call in another state, and I was saddened to hear the news. Over 10 years, we cultivated a fierce, respectful love for one another, and what I loved in her most was her commitment to that church, no matter what, no matter how insufferable, in her humble opinion, the sermons. She kept her covenant with that people, with their proud history and the bright promise of their future, and with the free faith tradition they embodied. I was a young minister then, and her way of being in relation, her integrity, taught me more about Unitarian Universalism than anything I'd learned in seminary. This is not my story. This is a story by my colleague, the Reverend Victoria Safford. She shared this memory of her former congregant in UU World in 2013. If this story sounds familiar, it's because I've shared it many times. Back when it was easy to have in-person classes in the Mickelson Room, I would share Safford's reflection in our gatherings for newcomers. I would share Safford's story, as this story speaks to the heart of living in covenant, and in this way is the story of every Unitarian Universalist congregation. I invite us to consider living in covenant this morning as the larger community of Unitarian Universalists, through the UA's Commission on Appraisal, has recently completed reflection and research on this part of our shared life together. Their findings are published in a report, Unlocking the Power of Covenant. And as the theme for October is cultivating relationships, this is perhaps the best time to consider covenants. Human relationships are the bonds that bring such religious promises into reality. Victoria Safford's experience with the church member and the stubborn love that grew between them reminds me of another colleague's story. This colleague is a Unitarian Universalist Christian and feels comfortable with traditional religious words such as God, holy, and prayer. Preaching one Sunday, she kept hearing a clicking sound. It wasn't until the receiving line that she figured it out. A member of the congregation, a dedicated atheist, was using a clicker to count the number of religious words she used in her sermon that he objected to. Like the member of Safford's congregation, this man and this minister found a way to bridge the chasm of their theological differences, to remain true to themselves and still respect one another. This second story also comes to mind as I recognize that the word covenant may itself inspire negative reactions. If the man with the clicker were here, I might add to his total. Many come to Unitarian Universalism from other faith traditions where covenant refers to a narrowly defined relationship with the holy. As noted in Unlocking the Power of Covenant, covenant may also speak to a relationship created without individual intention or consent, with God laying claim to a people and, with this claim, clear expectations for their practice and behavior. Many of the musical elements in today's service illuminate the power and beauty of the relationship between a people and their God. Such a covenant with the divine is a meaningful and life-giving connection. And some have felt hurt or excluded by faith experiences that somehow told them they are outside this sacred bond. This morning, I seek to reclaim the meaning of covenant. As shared in today's first reflection, the Unitarian Universalist approach to covenants derives from our early North American religious history. Unitarian Universalist covenants assume a connection with something greater than the individual self, but we as a community, with many different spiritual understandings, the shared earthly covenant is with one another, not with a king or a bishop. A congregational covenant is not a vertical relationship, but a lateral one, with all on equal footing, regardless of whether one is brand new or a long-timer, a big giver or small pledger, lay leader or minister. When one joins the Winchester Unitarian Society, they freely choose to be part of this congregation. Existing members, through the covenant they join through their membership, enter a covenantal relationship with the newcomer. As is often named in times of change, staff and ministers may come and go, but the congregation endures, and what holds a congregation together is its covenant. It's easy to confuse a covenant with a contract. Contracts, too, are promises made between parties. Yet, if terms of a contract are violated, the whole contract becomes null and void. Assuming all parties are willing to do so and to do the work of accountability and reconciliation, as Sana Saeed beautifully names in this morning's reading, a covenant endures. Victoria Safford also states this eloquently. A covenant is not a static artifact and is not a sworn oath. A covenant is a living, breathing aspiration made new every day. It can't be enforced by consequences, but it may be reinforced by forgiveness and by grace when we stumble, when we forget, when we mess up. At their best, worship services are sessions of one long conversation, divided by 7-day intermissions when we go out into the world to gather more experience and questions and return to the dialogue. Last Sunday, I named the spirituality of Octavia Butler as an example of process theology, the understanding that the holy is not a being, but a verb, the experience of change. In this way, I believe that living in covenant is the central spiritual practice of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. We grow and change through our experiences with one another, as much, if not more, than the spiritual ideas we hear under this roof. Whether it is participating in an adult education program, or attending a committee meeting, or memorial service, or cleaning up after a potluck, Unitarian Universalism is primarily expressed in how we do these things together, not just the content of these gatherings. Through living in covenant, congregational life becomes a laboratory where we all bring our spiritual homework. For church is, as Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams once said, where we practice being human. This would be a good time to reflect on the Winchester Unitarian Society Covenant. However, like many congregations studied by the Commission on Appraisal, we don't have one. Or we don't have a written one. Every community and culture has expectations of its members. How conscious this congregation wishes to be about its expectations is in itself a choice. About 8 years ago, when this congregation was in the midst of deep conflict, then intern minister Heather Concannon invited members of the congregation who were seeking a path towards healing and preventing future strife to consider crafting a covenant. The group's task was, in the words of Walter P. Hearst in Redeeming Time, to articulate the common understandings, agreements, and promises made by the members of the congregation that define their mutual obligations and commitments to each other as they try to live their faith and vision. Reverend Concannon offered the vision of right relations, of close, supportive, and loving relationships as that which would be sustained by a covenant, articulated, embraced, and perpetuated by the Society's members and friends. I do not believe that supportive and loving relationships require a covenant. Yet I also believe that having a shared understanding of why we are here and how we are called to be with each other has value. If you are new to the Winchester Unitarian Society, you might notice that there is a covenant in our worship service, the affirmation of shared ministry. It even includes the line, "We make and reaffirm this covenant this day." This affirmation became part of our corporate worship, not to become our covenant, but to recognize our covenantal way of being. Before we read this affirmation in worship each week, there was a ritual of the minister blessing the offering. Experience of this ritual was mixed by our members. One was disappointed that this ritual was short and perfunctory. Another was annoyed. "It's our money," she said. "Why are you touching it?" For me, though, it suggested something about the role of the minister that didn't quite feel right, that I could somehow bestow magic upon the fruits of our collective generosity. I wanted instead something that framed the gifts we give to the society and share with other organizations as symbols of our shared values. I wanted something that spoke of what we do together, minister and member, visitor and staff, all equal in our shared mission and all contributing to, using the language of the affirmation, our common power. In short, I wanted something that spoke to our covenant. But I also knew that the affirmation could not be our covenant, as covenants are grassroots documents. Thus, the introduction to the affirmation of shared ministry is as intentional as the affirmation itself. It is an invitation to read the affirmation together, not a directive. It is important to me that the decision to say these words that speak to why we are here and what we are called to do with our energy and our resources is as voluntary as the decision to walk in or log on was this morning. To live in covenant is to freely choose one another again and again, when it's easy and when it's hard, and when there is hurt, to also freely choose to do the work of repair and to create a new, beautiful thing that endures. Victoria Safford's story is a story of endurance, of one member's faithfulness through all seasons of her life. But it's also a story of the covenant's endurance, outliving both the member and Safford's ministry and continuing on to this day. If we were to give voice to the promise threaded through the 156 years of the Winchester Unitarian Society, what is that story? And how does our commitment to that promise show up today?
One hope for goal of our church is to encourage all who gather here together, either physically in the sanctuary or through live streaming, to grow more generous not only in spirit but in our actions. I believe this is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring we human beings closer to the divine through acts of creation, compassion, and generosity. We are now asked to live our values by exercising that generosity of spirit and also the generosity of our wallets by contributing to this morning's offering. Remember, the offering helps to support this church and all that it does for us, for you and for me. This morning, we will follow our usual practice of sharing the gifts placed in the offering plate with an organization living out Unitarian Universalist values. This morning, we share the plate with our long-term partner, the Women's Lunch Place, which continues to serve poor and homeless women in downtown Boston. If you are a first-time attendee, either in person or on live stream, in lieu of giving the offering, we invite you to be our guest. We ask instead that you complete the visitor card. People in the sanctuary can find these cards in the pew racks in front of you. Just put it in the plate when complete. A link to a visual visitor card will be shared with the live stream as we post information about online giving. The offering will now be generously given and received with gratitude. Those who wish to do so are invited to read together the affirmation of shared ministry. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Let us now rise in body or in spirit to join in singing our closing hymn, number 318, We Would Be One.
May you be filled with the blessings of this covenanted community. May you carry them with you as you depart from here. May you discover the places in the world where these blessings are needed. May you have the courage to share them. May there be a space within you to receive the blessings of the people whom you'll meet along the way. Go in peace. Amen.
Please join me in reading together the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. The service has ended, but our life of service continues. Those here in the sanctuary are invited to enjoy coffee hour on the Bell Tower Terrace outdoors. Those online, you are invited to join our Zoom room for virtual social hour. The link is in your order of service.